Vince Gill was the country music industry's golden voice, accruing 22 Grammys and 21 #1 hits, until 2000, when he would Amy Grant, a move that the Christian community deemed adultery. As a result, radio stations banned his music, protesters showed up at his concerts waving hate signs, and even now, at age 67, he continues to battle health issues. Vicente Gill, a man who had everything, is now witnessing it all crumble. He was born on April 12, 1957, in Norman, Oklahoma, into a family where music and law had an unusually harmonious relationship. His father, a federal judge, was also a skilled banjo and harmonica player, much like a seasoned bluegrass veteran. After a long day in court, Judge Gill would often return home to jam with his wife Jiren, who played harmonica as well. Vicente would lie in bed, listening to their music seep down the hallway, while their neighbors still echoed. Consider the summer nights when guitars and harmonicas echoed through the streets. The unique blend of serious courtroom moments and carefree pork-picking had a profound impact on Vince's soul. However, his upbringing was far from smooth. He was born with crossed eyes, which wasn't a minor issue but necessitated 2 invasive surgeries. Even after those, his left eye would wander when he was exhausted or upset. Vince later confessed that he began wearing spectacles not only to improve his vision, but also to conceal the eye that made him feel broken. When Vince was a kid, he was the target of relentless bullying from his classmates. Instead of running away, he hid out at home, engrossed in his guitar. Little did he know that at the age of 10, tragedy struck when his half-brother Bob was involved in a horrific car crash on a rainy highway outside of Oklahoma City. Bob had been a talented athlete and intelligent student before the accident, but he suffered brain damage so severe that he couldn't remember anyone's name for more than 25 years. For years, Bob required full-time care, which put a strain on Judge Gill's marriage. When Bob passed away in 1993 from a heart attack caused by his injuries, Vince watched as his parents' marriage crumbled. Years later, he said that those moments taught him what it was like to truly lose something, and he channeled that pain into songs that make people cry quietly in their cars. When Vince was 5 years old, he visited his grandmother's house and tried to play Old by Old. It wasn't just a gift. It was a statement that Vince was more than just a kid with a hobby. Music became his escape when things got tough. Vince's grandma was shocked and called Vince's parents to tell them they'd just seen something rare. By the time Vince turned 10, his family had saved up enough to buy him a Gibson ES-335 electric guitar, which cost nearly $800 in 1967, equivalent to about $6,500 today. After school, Vince started a bluegrass band called Mountain Smoke. On March 4, 1976, something bizarre happened. They opened for Kiss, the makeup-wearing rock and roll legends. Instead of lashing out, Vince would spend 6 to 8 hours a day playing guitar, mostly alone in the basement. Friends and family remember hearing sad, emotional tunes resonating through the walls. Vince's music teacher later wrote that Vince had a deep, aching sound in his playing, something far beyond his age. Monsters, the performance was held at the Oklahoma City Fairgrounds, and the audience was confused by a group of young musicians playing bluegrass. Instead of fiddles and banjos, they expected to hear fire and leather, so they booed, threw cups, and even shoes. In a raw, embarrassing, and unforgettable moment, Vince snapped, turned around, mooned the audience, and stormed off stage. The band eventually disbanded, but Vince didn't give up. He relocated to Kentucky and became a member of the Bluegrass Alliance. In 1977, he was a member of Boone Creek, a bluegrass band that featured a young Ricky Skaggs. Despite the group's brief tenure, Vince and Skaggs' sound helped establish a new standard for the genre by fusing traditional bluegrass with contemporary influences. The album the band released that year is now considered a classic. Fans talk about it as if it were a priceless find. The same year, Vince once again hit the road, this time to the West Coast, where he joined Sundance, a bluegrass band. Vince quickly learned that the band led by fiddle legend Byron Berlin was no laughing matter. Berlin had played with Bill Monroe and the Flying Burrito Brothers, so he expected nothing less than perfection. The band played the Palomino Club, one of Los Angeles' iconic venues, and Vince rubbed shoulders with legends like Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt. It took serious guts to bounce back from being booed off stage less than a year later, and in September 1978, Pure Prairie League was. The band's lead singer, Larry Goshorn, had recently left with his brother to form a new band, leaving them with no original members. In a desperate attempt to find a new singer, they held auditions. In 1976, a young bluegrass musician named Vince Gill re-entered their lives. Gill had opened for Pure Prairie League in Oklahoma City with his band Mountain Smoke, and they noticed him right away. When he returned to Los Angeles in 1978 after performing with Byron Berlin and Sundance, he jammed again with Pure Prairie League. The band's soundman, Jeff Reeder, remembered seeing him play in 1976, but he was still dedicated to bluegrass. After hearing him play again, they offered him the job. He was 19 years old, but his talent was already shining. At the age of 21, he took center stage as the band's new frontman, not only singing but also playing guitar, mandolin, fiddle, and anything else that had strings. By 1979, they were recording their seventh studio album, Can't Hold Back, in Miami at Criteria Studios. This was the first album with Gill as a full-time member, and her presence altered the dynamic of the band. Gill brought a smooth and emotional quality to her voice, and she began penning songs that blended elements of her musical influences. This album breathed new life into the band and, for Vince, marked the beginning of something much bigger. In 1980, the band released Firing Up, which featured their biggest hit to date, Let Me Love You Tonight. The song shot up to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, and Gill sang lead, and his voice was incredible. The album wasn't a huge hit, but it gave the band new life. The entire track was carried by the band, and jazz legend David Sanborn added saxophone. The sound was smooth, catchy, and fresh, and Vince didn't stop there. He also wrote, I'm Almost Ready. As for the other 5 songs on the same album, She's All Mine, You're My True Love, Lifetime of Nighttime, I'll Be Damned, and Jan Lou, the sound had changed, becoming softer, more polished, and leaning into. That change was being spearheaded by Vince Gill, but good runs don't always last. In 1981, the band released Something in the Night, which had a minor hit called Still Right Here in My Heart. However, the album failed to connect with listeners like their previous one had. Then, behind the scenes, tragedy struck when Casablanca Records went bankrupt and was sold to Polygram. The new owners dropped most of the roster, including Pure Prairie League, leaving the band without a label and disappointment in sales. Vince Gill and guitarist Jeff Wilson departed in early 1982. Gill had already gained acclaim as a solo artist. Pure Prairie League quickly signed Gary Burr to replace Gill, but the band's chemistry had faded and their momentum had been halted. Despite this, Vince's solo career was just getting underway. At the same time, he met Janice Oliver, a member of the country duo Sweethearts, in California, where he was establishing his music career. Of the rodeo, these two began as musical pals, but their relationship soon blossomed into something more. In 1980, they tied the knot, and 2 years later, on May 5, 1982, their daughter Jennifer Jeering Gill was born. In 1982, Vince Gill felt like he was about to break out, what with the success of his solo single, Let Me Love You Tonight, and all. He turned down Rodney Crowell's offer to join his band, the Cherry Bombs, because he was determined to make it big on his own. In spite of his best efforts, the music industry can be cruel. As the year came to a close, Gill's momentum waned, his songs failed to chart, gigs dried up, and his confidence began to waver. In early 1983, he contacted Crowell again and accepted the offer to join the Cherry Bombs, which proved to be the best decision he could have made. The band was a powerhouse, featuring Tony Brown and Emory Gordy Jr., names that would later shape the sound of country music. In that year, Vince made a daring move. He packed up his life in Los Angeles and moved to Nashville with his wife Janice and their young daughter Jennifer. It wasn't glamorous. Money was tight. They lived in a small rental house, and Vince learned how to survive in the industry not by chasing fame, but by playing the long game. Gill sharpened his guitar skills, improved his stage presence, and made connections that would pay off for the rest of his life. Vince had to mature quickly on stage and off, juggling fatherhood with late-night rehearsals and unpredictable paychecks. However, those months in Nashville helped him become tougher, sharper, and more focused. Meanwhile, Tony Brown, his former bandmate from the Cherry Bombs, was climbing the corporate ladder. He took any job he could get, one of which was playing guitar for Rosanne Cash, who happened to be married to Crowell at the time. This was in 1983, and Cash's band was tight, polished, and demanding. In the Nashville ranks by 1984, Brown had become head of A&R at RCA Records. He hadn't forgotten about Vince. He believed Gill had talent. Brown began quietly pushing behind the scenes, pitching Vince's demos to RCA's Joe Galante, and requesting every favor he could think of. In early 1984, Gill landed a solo deal with RCA. It wasn't just about talent, it was about trust. Brown knew Gill could deliver, and Vince wasted no opportunity to prove it. Released in February 1984 as a 6-song EP titled Turn Me Loose, 3 of the songs reached the top 40, while Victim of Life's Circumstances peaked at number 34. While the EP wasn't a smash hit, it did garner attention. Gill spent countless hours in Nashville's Woodland Studios recording with top session players, ensuring that every moment counted. This dedication indicated that the EP was more than just another hopeful voice in country music. It signaled that Gill was a serious artist. Prepared for bigger stages that same year, things took an even turn for the better. On April 10, 1984, Gill was named the top new male vocalist by the Academy of Country Music. It was his first major award, and for a moment, it seemed like everything was coming together. However, fame didn't arrive overnight. After The Things That Matter, his good but unsuccessful album, came out in 1985. Gill continued to work hard and improve, but the spotlight never shone on him. Never quite broke through, but that ACM award served as a constant reminder of his talent, voice, and the industry's attention. By 1989, Vince Gill had reached the ripe old age of 32, and RCA was at a loss as to how to handle him. However, Tony Brown, then employed at MCA Records, was not finished yet. In a daring pitch, Brown persuaded the label to sign Gill, despite the fact that most labels prioritized younger acts. Brown firmly believed that Gill's greatest work lay ahead, was still in store for him. He provided him with a new sound, stronger songs, and a team that got him. Signing with MCA wasn't merely a new contract, it was a second chance. The opportunity paid off quickly. In October 1989, Gill released When I Call Your Name, an album that was completely out of left field. It blended country, pop rock, and even bluegrass, and it didn't follow trends. Instead, it created its own songs, such as Oklahoma Swing, which featured Reba McEntire and added a traditional feel Never, and others. I Call Your Name didn't just earn airplay, it made history. The single climbed to number 2 on the Billboard country chart. Suddenly, Vince Gill wasn't just a respected musician, he was a hitmaker in No Lonely, which leaned into a softer emotional sound. The title track, though, was the real standout. Gill's voice cut through like glass, pure aching, unforgettable. Critics loved the mix of styles. Fans couldn't stop playing it. And Nashville started paying attention again. At the 1990 Country Music Association Awards, the song was named Single of the Year. A year later, it won Gill his first Grammy for Best Male Country Vocal Performance. The song had nearly never been released, but it changed his life. The timing was perfect. The songs, the production, and the emotions all came together in 1992, when Gill had just arrived. The album went platinum and sold over 1 million copies. Such success was unusual for an artist over 30 without a big hit at the time. The platinum certification wasn't merely a numerical achievement. It served as confirmation that Gill's music was in high demand by radio stations and concert promoters. Suddenly, the once unemployed man became one of the most popular acts in country music. Despite his newfound fame, Gill remained dedicated to his work as a session player, and many famous artists sought him out for more than just his guitar skills. Vince Gill was a household name from 1992 to 1994, appearing on country radio, at award shows, sold-out arenas, and singing on Emmylou Harris's Bluebird. He lent his vocals and guitar to Rosanne Cash's 1990 album Interiors and, in an unexpected turn of events, Bonnie Raitt's 1991 album Luck of the Draw. Gill's versatility allowed him to effortlessly transition from country to rock and blues. As the soundtrack of that era, Gill produced 4 consecutive #1 hits in just 2 years. I Still Believe in You in 1992, Don't Let Our Love Start Slipping Away in 1993, One More Last Chance in 1994, and Trying to Get Over You in 1995. It wasn't a fluke. Rather, Gill had discovered the ideal combination of classic country soul and modern country shine. Reached #1 on the charts and remained there for 20 weeks, solidifying Gill's meteoric rise to stardom. However, by the turn of the century, things began to change. In 1998, he released The Key, an album that sounded different because it was different. It dealt with the dissolution of his 17-year marriage to Janice Oliver and featured songs like The Key to Life and every track was laced with raw honesty. While critics hailed Kindly Keep It Country as his most daring work to date, the album failed to live up to its billing and failed to sell as many copies as his earlier albums. Nevertheless, the album served as a watershed moment, marking the end of Gill's most successful chapter and the beginning of a more personal one. Meanwhile, Gill's personal life was not only impacting his music, but also making headlines. In 2000, he with Amy Grant, queen of Christian pop, who had sold. They had already sold over 30 million albums and won 6 Grammys between them when they went public as a couple, shocking fans of both country and Christian music. Gill had recently finalized his divorce in 1998, and Grant had divorced her husband Gary Chapman in 1999. The timing of their splits raised eyebrows. The two had met in 1993 while still married to other people, and rumors of chemistry had followed them ever since. News of Grant's divorce and remarriage shocked many of her Christian fans, who had long held her in high esteem as a symbol of pure faith-based music. Some radio stations even went so far as to stop playing her music, while others expressed feelings of mourning for her soul. The backlash revealed a deeper truth about the delicate nature of her relationship with her fans. Pedestal can be when a religious figure dares to be human. In 2013, when Vince Gill was supposed to perform at the Kauffman Center in Kansas City, a group of protesters from the Westboro Baptist Church showed up outside the venue. Their signs read, "God hates adultery," and Vince Gill took another man's wife. The protesters weren't content with just picketing. They were attacking Gill's marriage to Grant, which he had been married to for years. Unlike most celebrities, Gill walked calmly but directly approached the protesters, confronting them about his infidelity. Confronted the protesters head-on, one of them yelled out, "What are you doing with another man's wife? Don't you know that divorce plus remarriage equals adultery?" Gill showed no emotion and stood firm. Jesus spoke powerfully about forgiveness and grace, but he retorted, "You guys don't have any of that." The video of the confrontation quickly went viral. It was 2020, and Vince Gill and his wife Amy Grant were supposed to have a routine cardiologist appointment. Instead, they were both flagged for further testing, and Gill learned that her husband had a rare heart condition called PVR, which stands for partial anomalous pulmonary venous return. Fewer than 1% of people have it, and many more never know. In Vince's case, some of the veins were affected. Fans immediately praised his courage and dignity for handling hate with truth and dignity. Even though he was unaware that his lungs were pumping oxygen-rich blood to the wrong side of his heart, causing it to work harder than it needed to, he managed to survive for decades despite this. However, just a few weeks later, life dealt him another blow. He and Amy both needed open-heart surgeries, and they happened to be scheduled for the same day. Unfortunately, the surgeries occurred during the pandemic, when hospitals were not allowed visitors. So instead of being there for each other, Gill recovered alone. Amy was bicycling near a Nashville golf course when she lost control and crashed. She was knocked unconscious for 10 minutes before help arrived. She had suffered a traumatic brain injury, and memory loss hit her hard. Despite the pain, surgeries, and silence that followed, he felt a weight lifted off his shoulders for that brief moment when he could see Amy. In early 2023, Gill withdrew from 3 major concerts, not because she wanted to, but because doctors discovered a growing cyst in her throat. The surgery, which lasted 5 hours, was necessary to remove the cyst. After the procedure, Amy struggled to sing, walk straight, and joked that she felt drunk even though she wasn't. Despite this, she remained resilient and kept moving forward, comparing herself to an old car that had been dented and repainted. Vince, on the other hand, never left her side. Amy needed him, so he rested. She had a rough recovery from a bike crash and throat surgery. Vince said it felt like they couldn't catch a break. Despite this, he stayed by her side, helped her through the worst days, and prioritized her healing. His fans lauded him, calling it true love in action. Meanwhile, Gill had his own health problems. Polyps had formed in his vocal cords, making singing painful. He had to undergo therapy, and unfortunately, Vince Gill faced a series of challenges that hindered his ability to continue performing. First, he endured chronic back pain, which necessitated physical therapy and dietary changes. As arthritis worsened his condition, he had to reduce his touring schedule. However, he never stopped pushing forward, finding ways to adapt and overcome these obstacles. Then, in late 2022, an unexpected incident occurred when a 75-year-old woman named Joyce posted an innocent comment on Vince Gill's Instagram account, assuming he would. After traveling to Boston, Joyce fell victim to a nightmare scenario. Scammers posing as Gill privately contacted her, then transferred their chat to Telegram. They managed to convince her that they were in love, and she ended up sending them nearly $450,000. The scammers persisted in making her believe that Gill was married, that Amy had frozen his assets, and that he needed the money to pay off an assault accusation. Joyce's daughter tried to stop them, but they persisted. Social workers, but the con artists had hoodwinked her into giving them her money. By the time the truth hit, Joyce's mental health had already deteriorated to the point where she couldn't process it. When Vince Gill's team intervened, they issued a public warning, stating that anyone posing as Vince Gill online was definitely not. Vince would only have his accounts managed by experts, and he would never send fans private messages. The damage had already been done when Vince had another health scare in May 2025. This time it was kidney stones, which were painful enough to send him to the hospital. Fans understood and flooded social media with prayers and messages of support when his daughter Jenny informed them that Vince was recovering, but it had been scary. Gill, who was known for always showing up, had to step back again. Vince's shows in Birmingham and St. Louis were canceled. Not only did Vince not slow down in May 2025, he also embarked on his biggest summer tour in years. This particular tour marked the 50th anniversary of his departure from Oklahoma in 1975 to pursue his dreams. The tour would visit over 30 cities before concluding with 4 emotional nights at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville, a sacred venue for Gill, where he has performed. Visited the venue on 100 separate occasions, but this solo residency held special significance. It was a celebration of Vince Gill's success as a country music artist by 2025. Despite enduring passing trends, a severe illness, and supporting his wife through her darkest hours, Gill returned to the stage with an open heart, his concerts drawing sold-out crowds, and his voice sounding as soulful as ever. Jim Moose Brown, the finest keyboardist in Nashville, Wendy Monton, whose voice could rattle the walls, Tom Bukovac, the guitar wizard, and a whole roster of industry greats, these weren't just sidemen. They were family. On stage, they joked, traded solos, and lifted each other up, much like Gill had done for everyone around him in recent years.